Okay, this is my vlog for my creative features module. Um, in this vlog, it's pretty much going to be going through my brand development for CV, business cards, general career direction, and also the poster for my final year project. Okay, so to start off with, something I do in my work is sort of brand development and marketing material, collateral, that sort of way. So what I started off with in this project was making a sort of introductory brand guide for myself for my own material. So for my website, for my socials, and pretty much what I'm hopefully going to be going down the line of my company in the future. So yeah, started off with a brand guide, which I'll introduce to you here. Okay, so as you can see, the contents is here, and then the introduction, just pretty much saying like, this is what I've been using to develop my final year project, my final year poster, my CV, business cards, all sort of stuff. And yeah, hopefully I can continue to use this branding as I move forward in my career and stuff like that. So all very useful and all very what I felt was necessary to do this part of the module properly. Okay, so I began with initially getting this sort of thought process out, the brand personality, what I wanted people to think of whenever they thought of my brand. You can see that on the right here, just a bit of introduction on the left, but as you can see, it's more of a creative, edgy, can do a lot of things, so it's all around. I do a bit of corporate work, I do a bit of just general work, and yeah, so you can sort of see that on the right hand side there. That's what I started off by doing before I started doing any sort of branding, any sort of color, anything else like that. I just wanted to know what my brand direction was going down. So yep, and that's what you can see on the right hand side there. It's just a quick sketch. I then moved on to looking at color language, color theory, and everything that goes into that. I initially, whenever I first started looking at color theory, there wasn't really any one thing that was jumping out at me, but the idea of my company being an all-round, doing a lot of different things, I wanted to combine it, and green seemed to be a combination of a couple of things that I wanted. Sort of see that here, that sort of development, that sort of idea. Yeah, so sort of combining the yellow and the blue. I did want the blue in it because the blue is sort of this idea of professionalism and everything, and quite a lot of the companies I work with actually use blue. So you know, you got your Microsoft and your Cisco's and your Zooms. That's the world that I work in. So it's all very heavily blue, and that seemed like a good way to keep in tune with that sort of technology industry. And the yellow is obviously the whole modern, youthful, that sort of idea, and the green seemed like a good combination with the growth and the sustainability and all sort of stuff. So green seemed like a good shout with the hint of the blue because of the market I'm in. So that's how I sort of progressed on, was combining those sort of colours and that sort of idea. As I moved into it, I stopped liking the idea of having the blue. The blue and the green didn't really work together in the ways that I wanted it to. But as I sort of went down and looked at different colour palettes and stuff like that, I really liked how the sort of turquoisey aqua colours were looking, because it was actually a colour I used quite a lot in my photo editing. So that was working quite well in my head. And as you can see, this is just a bit of colour paletting and different tones and stuff like that. And you can see that I'm sort of moving towards that one that I've finished on circled, and that's the one that I've developed out a bit further. And then as you can see, just again trying out different codes and combinations of greys and blacks, because I wanted the sort of monochromatic idea to be the foundation of a lot of what I worked with, and a lot of my branding was this sort of combination of the monochrome with the green as a highlight color and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty much what this is coming down to, just trying out different palettes and different greys and blacks and stuff, and then using the white and black actually as my highlights. So that's where that all moved towards, and so this was the final color usage and color paletting that I decided upon. On the left hand side, you can see just the codes and the blocks of the color, and then the next one is a sort of gradient. So the white and the black were going to be my text, my highlight, and that sort of thing. So font, or sort of for bodies of text, for Any particular highlight, bullet points, white and black were going to be my main usage, but the gradients of the greys and the green I wanted to use mainly as my foundation, use as my filler content. On the right hand side, you've also got the color usage, so the white and the black will be used equally, and then the greys and the green will probably be used about the same amount. So that'll make up the body of the body of the branding. Essentially, will be the greys and the green. So that's what it came down to in the end, and that was how I progressed throughout the rest of the branding, and the rest of the development process was using this color palette, and it was something I was quite happy with, and I was happy to move forward with it. So yeah, that was the basis of the color theory and the foundation of the rest of the brand. Okay, so the font is something I can probably get over quite quickly, but basically I wanted, because of the sort of more edgy textures that I ended up using and the more monochromatic color scheme, and it's a bit more, I would say that the brand is a little bit less clean than most would be in the more corporate world. So I wanted my fonts and the way I use text to be very clean, very strong, very bold, and contrast everything. So I ended up going for a mix between these sorts of, they're not completely sans serif for the titles, but there's still the strong, bold fonts. And then my body of text would be a sans serif. And in the end, I settled on Agency FB for the title font, which you can see on the right hand side here, and then Sugoi UI for the bodies of text. I saw a bit later on that these fonts aren't obviously available on every platform, so not all web development softwares and not all social media platforms allow for these fonts, but using that idea of the strong, bold titles and strong sans serif body fonts, I can still keep it quite strong throughout any platform I'm using. So that idea was something that I carried forward, if not the actual fonts, if they weren't available, but if possible, Agency FB and Sugoi were my go-tos. So yeah, textures were something that I thought was quite a good idea, just to keep brand recognition through even the backgrounds and through filler content. So if I was just filling up the background with something, I still wanted it to be on brand, still wanted it to be a bit different and a bit edgy, a bit out there. So I developed these textures. The textures actually came from something that I was doing in my major project, so it actually filled backwards rather than going forwards. But I liked the idea, and I thought it'd be really good to include them. And as you can see, I've used them on the pages, and they're just part of my brand now. I've got these two separate textures, the green and the grey, just depending on where I want to use them and depending on how I want to use them. But I've got those two options, and something I can continue using throughout the brand. So okay, so quite early on, actually, before I started this process, I knew I wanted to have a personal logo. Logo development started quite early on, and as you can see on the right hand side here, it's just a couple of different iterations, and I wanted it to reflect the brand quite well. So yeah, the one in the bottom right with the circle around it is the first iteration of what eventually became the final design for the brand, for the logo. I talked to a few lecturers in uni and a few of my peers and classmates, and this is what I ended up coming up with from their feedback. The actual logo is what I use mainly everywhere with the A and the M, but the bottom one with the text as well, that's using the Agency FB. That ties it back into the fonts quite nicely. It's got a slight letter spacing to it just to separate it and make it a bit more unique to just a normal header. But if I was to use any sort of title logo, it'd be that one. If it's a bit smaller and a bit more illegible or a bit just harder to read, really, I'd still have the am.artofficial beside it just to make sure it's still there. But obviously the logo stands quite strong by itself, so it can be used pretty much everywhere. It's all grand. I am, however, keeping a circular version. Now, it's not to be used as commonly and avoided if possible, but I know that a lot of social platforms prefer a circular profile picture or something like that. So I have got a circular outlined version still, in case I know for Instagram uses a circular profile picture, and I prefer to have something that lines up with that circle, so I've kept this one. But as you can see, I've wrote there in the branding that although it's used sparingly, it won't diminish the brand because the AM is still quite strong, quite unique, so I can still use that and keep it quite on brand, consistent, so I'm happy enough with using it if I have to. Okay, and photography is something else I can probably just jump over, but editing style keeps everything quite consistent and quite on brand. So if I'm having a grid on Instagram and it's all got the same colors and the same uses and stuff like that, edited in this sort of way, then it all keeps it succinct and keeps it on brand. So if possible, editing in this sort of way is preferable. But obviously, if I'm doing something for someone else, I won't necessarily force my editing style upon their brand. So it's just something that I can bear in mind if I'm doing something for myself. So yeah, I can just jump over photography. Okay, so before I jump into business cards and the sort of progression of my brand into business cards, website, CV, and sort of stuff, I just want to talk a bit about my sort of career direction, because at the minute I'm not going straight down a animation career route. I'm more going down a digital media specialist route. At the minute, or since placement year 2 years ago, I was in a creative marketing placement essentially, which involved graphic design, animation, photography, just for marketing terms or for marketing requirements, and that's pretty much where my career is headed. So come graduation, I'm still working with that same company, but come graduation, they hope to put me into a more permanent role with a job title that fits my role a bit better. And I have had a bit of research, a bit of look into what I would be applying to if I was to use my skill set to go further in a different job. And the job requirements actually fit a digital media specialist better. So that's what I'm using for my title as of right now, in terms of my CV and my website and all that sort of stuff. So as you see going forward here, it'll say digital media specialist with graphic design, photography, and animation as the sort of professionalism, or my profession. So yeah, just a note on sort of career direction and the research that I've done into where I'm going in the future. Okay, so with business cards, what you see here is my first iteration of a business card that I designed. Obviously using the branding that I've just all made up, the logo and the textures and the color palette and stuff like that, and the fonts as well. But this was the first iteration that I did, and it actually went for, had it reviewed in a tutorial with my lecturer, a couple of lecturers and peers and stuff like that, and it was recommended, quite a few changes actually recommended. With those recommendations, I actually made, once I had my feedback, I created this second version, which was pretty much exactly what had been recommended to me, as a more cleaner, less busy just version. However, after making this version, I wasn't too sure on it, and I actually preferred the original one that I've made. And after asking, my peers, I actually did a poll on my am.artofficial Instagram, and the original one was actually the winner in terms of what everyone else preferred the look of. So I'm sort of at a crossroads now of not knowing which one to go with. Obviously, the one that's been recommended to me has been recommended by professionals in the creative world and in the educational world. But in terms of what the layman prefers, they actually prefer the one that I made. So I'm not too sure what to do with that at the minute. I'm probably looking to get more feedback in the next couple of weeks and months as to which one I should actually just print and go with. But yeah, at the minute I'm torn. But it's really between the two. Yeah, just a bit of a dichotomy there. So yeah, after having a look at the business cards, my next sort of route was into the CV. I wanted to obviously keep it on brand, keep it that sort of stuff. I have used a bit more white in it than the brand would suggest, but with bodies of text, I wanted it to be as readable as possible, obviously. So I have put a bit more white in there. I have also done a bit of the graphical aspect of it. Now, it's very common to be done in creative industry CVs where they have like a percentage of what sort of skills, but it's just a good way to show a lot of information about your skill set in a nice compact sort of attention grabbing way. So that's what I put down the bottom, just my technical skills, other tools, personal skills, just to go into as much detail or as much information as possible in as short a space. So I'm quite happy with that. It's got some social links and stuff on there on both my group business card and my CV. So I think they go quite well together. I would actually probably argue that the CV goes better with my original business card as well. Just because I didn't want to make my entire CV black, or not necessarily black, but at the darker tones of the texture. So I would actually think that the white of the business card ties in a bit better to the white in the CV. So again, it'll have to really be what business card I end up going for, but I'm happy with the CV either way. So yeah, that's the first draft of that. So another aspect, obviously, of the brand and all of my sort of creative future is my digital content and how I'm going to progress and share my content and get more awareness and audience and stuff like that. So I have used Wix in my job. I've used WordPress, Wix, Squarespace. I've used them all, but I prefer Wix for just making something look nice for someone who can't code. So I have used Wix to make up a website. You can see that in there. I haven't fleshed out too much, but basically I'm hoping to have photography, graphic design, animation as separate pages, which people can go in and view. In the photography, obviously I've got my whole Instagram as well, which you can see there. So I've got loads of content that I can share personally on my photography, and whenever I finish my final year project, obviously there's going to be a lot of content on the or it's going to be at least one project on my animation. For the graphic design, because of a lot of the work I've done is for ISDM for the company I work for, it's quite hard to share that publicly. So I'm going to have a sort of unlisted YouTube video for all my ISDM animations, or like a private document to share my graphic design, because there's a lot of content there which I can't put onto my socials and can't put onto my website. But in terms of the amount that's there, it's worth having in a separate document if people ask for it. So I'll have all my photography on my page, on my website, have my animation development and my vlogs from my animation project. I'll have those linked and shared on my website. And then for the graphic design, as I said, unlisted something, just something that people can maybe request of me to get. But there's loads of content there, and yeah, and then obviously you can see my you can see my Instagram there. So it's got all my photography, it's all branded up, it's got my logos, and you can see that I've utilized the circular logo rather than the hexagonal one. And yeah, so the photo editing, all that sort of stuff, it's all there. Yeah, just something that I'm going to be using a bit more in the future to build an audience, share my work and stuff like that. Will be using this website and my Instagram. So I thought it'd be quite good to get them branded up and get them done properly. And last but not least, I've got my poster for my major project. This is going to be a bit more than just this screen, so I'll show you now my sort of development process for this poster. Okay, so in my research, I had right off the bat, I knew Aldi Moss had been the Mondo posters, been something that I quite like for a while now. I did a project on them back in second year university. So I really like this sort of cutout style, and the way Leon's poster is done here, and there's a few up here, different types of the same idea, but that sort of cutout style, but obviously done in my branding and my animation stylization. So again, actually funny enough, this Joker poster had my sort of greeny blues in it, which is quite nice to see how someone else has used it. And then other sort of, because obviously the main animation is sort of quite reminiscent of the Blackwater Gospel style and how they've done the woody 2D textures on their characters and that sort of stylization. So I wanted to see what they had done for their poster as well. And the black seals, the sort of strong black with a harsh white cutout. Was a TV series that was quite inspiring, the stories that I was using. So I wanted to see what they were doing for their posters and their advertisement. And then in my head, sort of combining all these ideas together. What I eventually came up with out of that first sort of development process was, as you've seen, what's this poster here for the Chained? the images on the right hand side, they are images from my animation themselves, so the character in the boat, just to keep the textured, grungy aesthetic in the poster. So it's got my branding colors, it's got my textures, but they're obviously now synonymous with each other because the textures of the animation sort of inspired the textures of my branding. So they're both there in that poster. The font obviously then is not on brand with me with the AM branding, but it was closer to what suited the themes of the themes of the animation. So in my first sort of feedback session, in my first tutorial, when I showed this, the feedback was actually that the font and the lettering was good for the themes of the animation, but a bit more could be added to the poster design itself. So ideas of having some chains, because obviously the animation is called chain, so having some chains about maybe some, because there's two protagonists in the animation, so maybe having them face off in the top right and left corners. So that was the first feedback for this poster, and I took that on board. Didn't have time to make those changes and develop out those ideas yet. But then whenever I was having my second feedback session regarding my CV and my business cards and stuff like that, I also had a look at this, and the feedback in that was actually that the outline, the sharp outline on the black background was really strong, and that imagery was really strong, but the font could be more in line with the theme, and it looked like it just been placed on. So obviously those were contradictory ideas and didn't really help in the development of my poster, because both have been approved and also disapproved. In my head, I quite like it as it stands. It will need redone because this ship isn't really reminiscent of the ships in my story, but the idea itself I quite like. I think the lettering suits quite well. It could be more involved with the piece, and obviously we'll have to put my name on it and stuff like that. But if I go back to this, a few examples that I was looking at, this sort of, I don't know if you can see this, but there's like a fine line border around this, and I really like that idea of having this really fine line with a small lettering, and yeah, a lot of these look like they've just been placed on, and I'm not too sure where to go with the font, because every attempt that I've made since that feedback tutorial, I don't think I've been adding to it by changing the font. I've just been making it a bit more messy and a bit less minimalist. So I am torn as of what the direction to take on it, because personally I'm happy with it. So but besides all that, I'm happy with how the branding has been incorporated into it. So if the idea behind this poster, behind my animation, was that if I was displaying all of my CV, business card and poster at one stall, with my website, my Instagram, if I was displaying them all in one area, that it'd all be succinct, and it wouldn't look as if the poster was done by someone else, essentially, or the animation was done by someone else. It would look like I had done everything, because I obviously have. So that was the idea behind the poster, and I think that that's been carried through quite well into how I've designed that. So overall, quite happy with the branding process, the CV, business card, website. I'm happy with how it's all came through to my animation and my poster. So yeah, I guess to summarize and reflect on the process, it's been really helpful to first look at it as a branding task, as it's something that I've done once or twice before now, and utilizing sort of rules that I set for myself and use assets that I've set for myself. It sort of narrows down this monumental task of coming up with a whole new coming up with CVs and coming up with business cards and all that sort of stuff, whenever you've got a small foundation of rules that I have decided upon, I've developed myself, that refining it down really helps with building a stronger, building. Once you've got those strong foundations, the building itself will be stronger. The feedback is obviously really useful, and has directed a lot of what I've done. At the same time, whenever it's contradictory in both supporting and not supporting aspects of it at the same time, I sort of fall back on my guns of do what I feel is right, if that makes sense. So, for example, with the poster, that I feel like what I came up with originally was strong and contradictory, and I guess opposing ideas coming in from the outside don't necessarily help. And they can, obviously, if it's unanimous, if it's that needs changed and everyone agrees that it needs changed, then that's fair enough. Like, I'll take that criticism on board, and I have done in aspects of it. But in aspects, I think that I need to hold strong to what I believe in as well, because not even necessarily what I believe in, but putting it to a wider audience, as I've done with the business cards. I felt that there was a possibility that what I came up with after feedback wasn't as strong as what I'd originally come up with, and then once I got the feedback from a wider audience, it was right of me to think that way in the first place. Obviously, you can take someone's opinion with greater weight. If someone's a lecturer or a doctor of graphic design or whatever, you might be inclined to take their opinion with a greater value than just the layman or a general person. But at the same time, what I'm producing now will be viewed by the layman more often than it's viewed by a professor or a lecturer. And I guess that means that I should be probably making it for the wider audience before I'm tailoring it to individual people, I suppose. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at with the impasse. I guess that's where I'm at after reflecting on it all. And I suppose by the end of this module, I'll know which one I go with. But that's my vlog for the Creative Features module. Thanks for watching, I guess. Have a good one.